Hello everybody, Mike here, and today I want to talk about Bane Dream, the Weiss set Bane Dream. And I'm making this video for two specific reasons. One is kind of just as a follow-up to the article that I wrote on Fine Time Cuisine about the double Yukina deck. Since I've written the article, a lot of people have come up to me or messaged me online talking to me about the deck and their thoughts on the deck, what kind of cards they tested with the core of the build. And I've had a lot of insightful discussion with a lot of people. And I've changed the list quite a few times since I originally wrote the list. So I want to showcase that here. Eventually I'll also get around to updating the list on the website so that it can just be the most recent updated version. But I also wanted to talk about a couple more Bane Dream decks that either I myself have played or I've seen other people play that have piqued my interest or were just fun decks or alternatives to being competitively viable. So I want to showcase those as well. And forgive me if I think I talk slow or stutter at times. It's kind of awkward talking to no one. So let's just get started. So the first deck we're going to go through is the original list I wrote featuring the double Yukina combo. So let me just lay out the list quickly here. And as I lay out the deck list, you'll notice that for the most part, the concept remains the same. Now there's a few adjustments that I've made. And if you've read my article, you can probably tell what they are, but if you haven't, feel free to check it out. I'll provide a link in the description below. So this is the current list. Big things that have changed in terms of ratios. The original list that I featured in January ran 2 of the toilet event instead of the current 4. And the idea behind that was I just really wanted to fit just any event that was as unintrusive to the deck as possible in order to fulfill the condition for 2-1 Saaya, to be able to give the anti-backup / counter effect to the Yukina. Now, as I played more with the deck, I realized that the event in itself was just a really good card. So I went from 2 copies to 3, and then that third copy I cut out 1-0 Yukina, 2k counter for it, and then eventually I cut out 2-1 Arisa free fetch counter for a 4th copy, just to make the deck more consistent and I can see this card more often instead of relying on the very situational tech in the 2-1 Arisa, which I would say I don't really use that much, if at all. It's more of like, it's there. I thought I could put it in because I didn't really have anything else to put in, but I think it makes more sense that I want to make the deck consistently do what it wants to do more often every game, instead of just trying to tech for niche scenarios. The other change is that I added in a 2nd copy of the 2-1 Saaya, and I cut my 5th beater. Originally the list featured 2 Chisato and 3 Saaya, or 3 Chisato and 2 Saaya. Now there's only 4 total, and I put that slot in the 2-1 Saaya. And this is just to be able to see the card more often, since the list doesn't feature, for example, red gates like the 1-0 Kasumi. And the ways you can search this out directly are only through the drop searcher Kokoro or the drop salvager Kasumi and the Remy Brainstorm. So you kind of have to go through hoops to get it, and hopefully you can just draw one mid-game and hold on to it, and then you can kind of search out other things that you might need, for example, only for level 3s. Another thing that was changed about the list since its inception was the original list featured 4 Yukina, 2 Kokoro Musashi, and 1 3-2 Sayo early play. Eventually, I changed the list to fit a 3rd Kokoro Musashi. And the idea behind that is that there will be times when you're not able to get double Yukina off. So in those cases, you would really want to have 1 Yukina and 2 Kokoro Musashis to be able to push for maximum damage. So adding a third copy made sense. Now, I took out that third copy of Kokoro Musashi and added in 1 copy of 3-2 Kasumi. The idea being that if you top check and the damage sticks, then that's more damage that's going through compared to the 3-2 Kasumi, compared to the 3-2 Musashi. Also, the card is kind of just really over spec in terms of being a 15k base attacker, and then when she attacks, your opponent can't use any event cards or backups from hand, so that's really good. Just guarantees the kill, doesn't let your opponent do any kind of shenanigans with like free fetch or move counters. So like this Kasumi combined with this Saaya means that most of the time your opponent's not going to have any interaction when you're attacking with your level 3s. For the most part, the rest of the deck remains the same. I also changed, I added in another copy of Kokoro Drop Searcher in lieu of the second copy of 00 Saaya Drop Salvager. Just because the Rimi salvages, the Kokoro searches, and the Kokoro has 2 soul. It's also just a tiny bit more yellow. Since I took out the 3-2 Kokoro, there's 1 less yellow, so I still have a comfortable amount of yellow to be able to accommodate the 3-2 Musashi. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My choice of the anti-level killer is currently the 2-1 Tai Arisa Kasumi. At the time of this video, Love Live Sunshine Extra Booster has just come out in English, and as such, a lot of people are playing it, and people should expect that this deck is played in the English format for the foreseeable future. It's a really strong deck. But most importantly, though, is that the English format does not have any restrictions, or kind of like how in the Japanese format, there's a 3-choose-1 currently for Sunshine, where it's the 2-1 Mirai Ticket Rico, the 0-0 Kana, and then the 1-0 Ruby Akatsuki. So in English, people can play all 3. The problem that presents for most of the decks out there is that starting level 2, they can just gain board control and push huge amounts of damage with 3-2 Yo and 3-2 Chika. And then if they have the 0-0 Kana in the back row, even if you reverse the 3-2 Yo, they can just save it, unless you send it to bottom deck or stock or clock it or just remove it from the field. So that's why I have this here, is to specifically remove 3-2 Yo early play from the field. I know at my locals, there's at least 3 or 4 players that invested into Love Live Sunshine Extra Booster. Originally, at Hobby Shop Ichiban, the rule was that no matter which language you played, you had to follow the Japanese ban list. For example, if you're playing English Kantai, you would still have to abide by the, for example, the Hibiki and the Hazukaze choice. And that kind of stemmed from a long time ago. It's a long story, but we kind of overrode that rule with the Sunshine release so that English players can feel free to play whatever they want as long as they have all English cards. Which means Love Live Sunshine is unrestricted at our shop, which is good practice for any English events, and probably just the right thing to do because they're not playing any Japanese cards. They can do what the English format is doing, which is no ban list. Any other thoughts about the deck? Another thing that has been brought to my attention about this particular deck list is the substitution of the Rimi Brainstorm for Rinko Brainstorm. And with that, the inclusion of more copies of, for example, the 0-0 Yukina that resonances with the 3-2 Yukina. And the idea between this card compared to the Rimi in the Yukina deck is that if you hit a Brainstorm, you can search out 2 of the Yukina pieces. And since this deck doesn't have, for example, a Riki profile, pay 1, clock yourself, search your deck for level 1 or lower, if you hit a Brainstorm, you're really likely to get triple Yukina, which is something that you would probably aim to do at level 1. if possible. The downside of this card is that it only brainstorms 3, and if you hit more than 1 climax, meaning even if you hit 2 or 3 climaxes, you still only get to search through music and discard 1 card. It's not like regular brainstorms where you search per climax hit. It's if you hit any climax at all, you get to search your deck for 2 music characters and then discard 1 card. So we kind of try to mitigate that downside of the Brainstorm 3 at least, by playing more resonance targets and resonance cards such as the 0-0 Yukina, so that the Yukina on play, she top checks, and then if it's a music, you add it to your hand and discard a card. But she also has resonance with the 3-2 Yukina on play to get plus 1500 power, and then that turn when she reverses your battle opponent, you can send that card to the bottom of your opponent's deck. And then the Rinko has a once per turn effect of when you resonance, you can top check and put it on the top or bottom. So essentially, that means when you play or the Yukina and you resonance with her, not only do you get top check effect, but you also get the top check effect from the Rinko, which could essentially lead to a pseudo mill 5 brainstorm with your Rinko, which is pretty good odds to hit one climax and then search out 2 Yukinas. The kind of downside with this build, or this brainstorm choice rather, is that like I mentioned before, hitting 2 or more climaxes feels really bad. And it kind of gets a bit awkward post refresh sometimes. I would definitely run more of the Saaya drop salvager if I were to run the Rinko. I've tested with the Rinko several times. And I think throughout the course of 2 weeks, I tested it on and off when I was playing casuals with this profile with Rinko Brainstormer. In general, I think it's a pretty legit option. I haven't play tested it enough, I think, to form a definitive opinion on which one I think is better. But just based off of gut instincts alone, I feel like I've been pretty comfortable with the Rinko Brainstorm, so that's probably what I'll stick with. If I had more time or motivation to go back and revisit this concept, I just get like games out, just grind games, then I might form a different opinion. And if I do, you guys will be the first to know. So that's the first deck. Now the second deck I want to feature on this video is a deck that Christian Jarbacher sent to me. I want to say a couple weeks ago, maybe not that long even, but a while back. And the list is as follows. Okay, so looking at the list, the deck runs Gate and Gold Bar for the level 1 Christmas Kasumi and then the level 3 Moca. And the idea of the deck is that, it's here. The idea of the deck is that 3-2 Moca is situationally a lot better than 3-2 Yukina as a finisher. And there are several reasons why that is the case. So if people don't know what 3-2 Moca does, I'm just going to read the text here. So on play, during the turn she's played from the hand to the stage. At the start of your encore step, you may heal the top card of your clock into the waiting room. So it's a regular healer, except the difference is that unlike come and play heals, this one is during the turn she's played. At the start of your encore step, she heals then. So it's something like you play the Mocha and then you refresh your deck, and then you take the refresh point, and then after you're done attacking, you can heal off that refresh point, which is pretty neat. The other effect she has is climax combo with the gold bar or gold bag, but we're going to use gold bar That is how I roll. On attack, if you have the climax in play, you can top check up to the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck, discard up to 2 cards that you checked, and then put the rest back in any order. And then you can do the same thing to your own deck. So you can top check top 2 cards of your own deck, discard any that you like, and then put the rest back in any order. And there's no stock cost to this, so it's just on attack, do the effect. This is good when you can't get reliable reverses with Yukina, and it's also a lot better than Yukina if you can't kill your opponent. Which is to say, it's a lot less heavy on having to pay cost in terms of both stock and hand. Yukina's effect is on reverse, pay 3, discard 1, while this doesn't cost any additional stock or hand at all. Not only that, but you also get to, if you triple Moca, you also get to, for the most part, rig the next card of your deck after you triple attack, which is most likely a climax. Since if you see a climax, you can just put it on the bottom 2 every time, and then once you're done attacking, the climax will still be there. So it's a really, really non-committal finisher. I think should be apt to describe this card. Compared to the 3/2 Yukina, where you play her, you're really just going all in on her, and then if you just play her for the heal and you want to wait, then she just feels really, really bad. So kind of to accommodate the whole idea of 3/2 Moca is this deck. And the engine is 3/2 Kasumi with the 0/0 Kasumi promo, and then the 1/0 Operation Tornado. It's a pretty free combo. You get a ton of plus with it, and as long as you draw your gates, then there's really no interaction that your opponent has in terms of you just getting back these tornadoes and then just keep on plussing as long as you get the gate. The 1/0 Rainy package still exists just because it's a really solid package, especially with your Suiciders, to be able to kind of mitigate on reverse and really screw around with the board state. The other level 3s are three Christmas Saayas and 2 TD Kasumi Burners. The Christmas Saayas I really like just because, unlike the 3/2 Yukina game plan, you're not as committed to hoarding resources and saving stock and kind of trying to deny opponents' reverses as much as you are in the Yukina deck. So you're really comfortable with playing this down to level 2 and then kind of using Suiciders or just creating an open lane elsewhere, and then this card can just start wrecking face just by moving around the board and getting to heal. So you kind of play like a level 2 sustain game when you get to level 2. The 3/2 Kasumi is just the alternative finisher. We don't want to run Musashi in this deck. 1, because there's not enough yellow, and 2, because she burns on play. So if you have enough stock, which this deck often does get at least 10 or more stock, then you can play the 3/2 Kasumi, and then you can play another 3/2 Kasumi, and then you can play 3 Mochas, have the go bar, and still attack 3 times with the Mocha, and while additionally dealing the 2 points of damage here. So that's really good synergy. Now, the green count could be something to point out, as there's really only 9 cards, and you don't want to clock like 4 of these, or essentially like 5 of these. You really only want to level the 2 in Himari, and you can do that fairly easily enough because you want to be clocking this card anyways for the free stock. And it just so happens that this is also your anti-level clock bomb, so it coincidentally counters, for example, Merit Ticket Yo, which is kind of funny because this is, without the clock bomb effect, it's still a pretty good card, and it's probably the thing I would run for Green Splash for 3/2 Mocha anyways. 1 copy of the 2/1 free fish counter. It's a lot better in this deck than the Yukina deck, just because 1, you run Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the gate. So anytime you trigger a gate, you can just salvage the 2/1 Arisa, and then next turn you can just pay it out in a free fresh. But 2, like I mentioned earlier, the 3/2 Mocha build is not as invested in resources as the 3/2 Yukina build is. So you can feel free For example, if you have 7 stock and you feel like you need to refresh your deck, you can still refresh your deck and then still play 2 Mocas, for example. Whereas with the Yukina build, you play this and you're kind of really limited in your options your next turn if you want to kill your opponent. Because at that point, you're not going for 2 3-2 Yukinas, you're going for 1 Yukina at most, and then like 1 3-2 Kasumi or 1 3-2 Kokoro. So that's just not really worth it. And that's the reason why I eventually cut the card from the Yukina list. It's just because it didn't do much of anything, like 9 out of 10 games. Other cards to talk about, the 0-0 Asuka, the little sister to Kasumi. Her effect is, on play, you can look at the top card of your deck and then either leave it there or mill it. And then she also has the on-play discard bond to the 3-2 Kasumi. So immediately you can see that there's a lot of synergy between these 2 cards, because not only does she discard bond for the 3-2 Kasumi, but she also top checks at the same time. And then the 3-2 Kasumi says on play, reveal the top card of your deck, and then if it's a music character, you can burn 1. So she not only fetches your 3-2 Kasumi, but she also guarantees, or at least tries to guarantee, the top card of your deck for the burn. And in general, I think it's just a really good card because it also acts as a costless discard outlet in case you want to get rid of whatever climax you have in your hand. 1 of each drop searcher, just for consistency. And that might sound weird because I only run 1 of each, but I kind of think of it as just 2 overall drop blank Xers. And I really like the idea of running utility 1-ofs in this deck, or kind of any deck featuring 3 Christmas Kasumi, just because Operation Tornado will always be able to get back level 0s, no matter how bad your mills are. So I run a lot of these cards just for situational, get myself out of trouble circumstances. And currently I'm testing on 1-1-1, but I really like the idea of the Chibi run, because this particular deck really lives and dies by drawing the gate. You really want to have the gate. And if you don't have the gate, you're pretty sad. The deck doesn't really do anything. And so having the Chibi Ron as an extra out to be able to on-play, pay 1, discard 1, look at up to top 3, add any card, and discard the rest. It's a good way to get climaxes if you need, and it's also a good way to discard climaxes if you need, as well as mill through climaxes that you know you have in your deck. For example, when I was first testing the list out, I know I came across a situation where I was really compressed. And I got to a point where I had 3 or 4 cards left, and there were like 2 or 3 climaxes in there. And I was really disappointed because I wouldn't be able to refresh very well, no matter what I did. And that's kind of when I started thinking about adding in the Chibi Ron, just because not only can you grab climaxes, discard climaxes, but you can also mill through climaxes to go into a cleaner refresh. So I think the card has a lot of use in various stages of the game in this deck, or basically any build with the 1-0 Kasumi. I think this card is just really solid. Other things, kind of just small things to talk about. Rimi Brainstorm, Rimi Runner are the choices here, and you run 4 of each. Runner just run 4 just for consistency. The Brainstorm I run 4 just for consistency. But mostly also just because the 0-0 Kasumi requires you to have another character basically with the popular trait. It's exactly like if you have Saaya or Tai or Kasumi or Rimi or Arisa. But basically any popular character. If you have another popular character on play, then you can discard 2 cards, search your deck for 1-0 Kasumi and the 1-0 event, add it to hand. And if you don't have it, then this card doesn't do anything. So we want to run the popular cards here. That does it about, I think, the individual card discussion. Overall, I really like the way this deck plays out. It feels pretty good to be non-committal in terms of future planning for the level 3 turn. Because I know depending on how the game is going, sometimes I'm forced into a situation where I kind of have to take risks with a Yukina double combo deck in order to kind of either hope I cancel and have another turn at level 3 with and then go off with double Yukina and then Musashi, or don't take the risk and try to kill them with like 2 Musashis and 1 Yukina. I think the Moca just does, on average, as good of a job as the Yukina finisher. Of course, this highly depends on the type of deck you're facing against, as well as the type of player you're facing against. Of course, players that know how Yukina functions will try to play around it at all times. So it's going to be a lot harder to get the double Yukina that you so want to be able to have that explosive finish. And according to Christian, the math for triple Moca is about the same, if not better, than 1 Yukina and 2 Musashis. Not to mention the fact that the Yukina version is spending a lot more stock and a lot more hand compared to the Moca, which not only triple heals you, but also rigs your deck to be able to cancel next turn, as well as not needing as much resources. So that's the argument between that there. Now we'll have to see in these 2 builds whether the Christmas Kasumi comes to English or not. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video was that I saw there was a lot of traffic on the article that I wrote. And that kind of just leads me to believe that there's a lot more people interested in Bane Dream since it's coming out in July in English. They kind of want to see what's up, kind of want to look for some deck lists to help them prepare, see if they need to pick up any set 1 stuff. So if we get the Christmas Kasumi promo, no doubt that will be a very powerful combo. But if we don't get the Christmas Kasumi combo, then we'll have to resort to something else. Something like the level 1 Yukina, or Standby, or 1-0 Lisa. But we'll have to get a bit more creative. Now the next 2 decks I want to feature are kind of less, I don't want to say less competitive, but just kind of more light-hearted decks. And the first of those 2 decks I want to feature is a list that I personally have not tested myself, but I have played a lot against. Specifically, Rando, I think he found this list somewhere online, made a couple changes to it, and it's been working really well for him. So I want to showcase that as well. So the concept of this deck is that you have a Hello Happy early game. And as you notice, I'm laying out these cards, and most of them, if not all of them, are Hello Happy. And it only gets to here when you notice that, wait, something's wrong. This is not just a Hello Happy deck. So this deck is Hello Happy mix with Splash Green. And the purpose is to be able to get a bunch of hand, push for a lot of damage, while being able to control your deck state and still have enough stock while you play the Amagis. So the concept is that, wait, where's 1-0 Kokoro? She's here somewhere. Oh, no, there she is. Okay, 1-0 Kokoro. 1-0 Kokoro, her effect is on play. If you have another music character, she gets 2,000 power, so on play 6,000. And then climax combo with Egao no Orchestra, which is a stock soul. And it's soon to be, at the time of this video, the trial deck for Hello Happy is not out yet, but it's soon to be also, I think, a cancel burn. But I think the stock soul is still the better option, just because you want to be able to spend stock on the Kanon Amagi. So when you play Climax, you can pay 1, look at up to top 4, and add a Hello Happy world character to your hand, and so discard the rest. Now the concept behind the green engine, now you'll notice that just like the previous deck, the deck doesn't have that much green. You have 4 of the 3-2 Mocha, 4 of the 2-1 Himari, and 1 of this IA healer. The idea being that you don't really need to play green until you're level 2 or level 3. And through Randall's testing and through my own testing through the Christian's deck with the Christmas Kasumi and the Mocha Gold Bar, is that you really don't need that much green at all for 3-2 Mocha to operate. Really, I've found this package just very satisfying to play with, and I don't think adding in more green cards just for the sake of adding green cards is necessary, unless there is something specific in green that you want to play outside of just grabbing green for color fix. Because you're going to be clocking this card quite a few times per game, ideally, and chances are you are going to be able to put one of these in your level by the time you get to level 3, and that's all that matters. But the rest of the deck kind of functions the same way as kind of a pure Hello Happy deck functions. You have the best parts about the Hello Happy package, which is the 0-0 Kaoru, which is just Akatsuki for Hello Happy. On play, discard a card. If you do, look at up the top 4, add a Hello Happy character, and discard the rest. You have the Hagumi, which is on play. You can clock yourself, clock the top card of your deck, and then discard a card to search your deck for a yellow climax, which is just very useful if you don't already have the stock soul, to be able to get the stock soul to consistently get the level 1 combo. And then you have 4 of the Yamagi, just to be able to grab additional cards as well as filter through your hand, which also has really good synergy with the 2-1 Himari. Because the 2-1 Himari is at the start of your climax phase. If you have 4 more characters, then you can put the top card of your deck into stock, and then you play the climax, and then you can activate a Magi immediately, and then pay out that blind stock that you just blind stocked with a Himari, so you're never going to blind stock. Look at top 4, add 1, so that's a good free plus. And then you can do either your second Magi or whatever, or you can just get the yellow card with stock soul. So stock is really easy in this build, just because you run both stock soul and the 2-1 Himari, so that your Kanon, no matter how many times you want to run play the effect, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to feel as burdened by the fact that you're paying out stock. Remember, for the Kokoro Drop Searcher in this deck, 1, because it has 2 soul, but 2, because a lot of the Hello Happy World cards only interact with each other. For example, the Kaoru only gets Hello Happy cards, and then the Kanon also only gets Hello Happy cards. So most of the time with these 2 targets, for lack of better things to get, you're going to be getting the 0-0 Kokoro Drop Searcher, which in turn will lead to searching out the 3-2 Moca. It also acts as a good discard outlet for the gold bar if you need it, but there are other discard outlets in the deck. Another thing to note is that there's 1 copy of the HIna. I think originally Randall, when he was playing this deck, he was running 4 of the Kokoro Early play, just I guess for a lack of things to play and for increasing consistency in seeing this card. And he eventually switched his current list runs 1 of the HIna, and I think his reasoning was just that in the case that he's not able to triple Moca, he can play the HIna and then pump up Moca so that it has a higher chance of living next turn, the IS effect being on play heal, and then on attack, choose one of your other music characters, and until the end of your opponent's next turn, they get power plus X, where X is equal to the number of music characters on your board, the number of other music characters on your board times 500. So you put it on the Moca, and she'll be 12k base. Drink of water. Now that's still a work in progress. I don't think this card is too consequential to how the deck functions, but it's kind of there as a tech just to see how it works. I'm sure there's other things that the list can try out, but for the most part, this is the core. And how it plays out is it's actually pretty obnoxious, because you mill through your deck really quickly on demand with the Kaoru and the Amagi, the Kanon. And if you cancel with the Kokoros, then you just get a bunch of hand back. And these ones, the Kokoros, they can actually salvage any character in Weidun. They're not just restricted to Hello Happy. So this is another chance that you're able to get the non-Hello Happy cards that you desperately want for your mid to late game. But basically, it's really easy to get hand, it's really easy to mill, it's really easy to filter, and if your opponent cancels with a Kokoro, you get a bunch of hand. If your opponent doesn't cancel, then great. This deck doesn't really struggle for hand even if you don't hit the Kokoro, just because it has other ways to plus, such as the early play Kaoru or the 0-0 Kanon. It's a pretty budget deck, and I've enjoyed watching it play out when I've played against Randall quite a bunch. And I think it's a very, very neat concept. So good job to whoever came up with that list. Now the last deck, last but certainly not least, the last Bang Dream deck I want to talk about. It's kind of like another theme deck, it's another fun deck. I wouldn't say it's the most competitive out of all the Bang Dream decks, but it certainly can hold its own. And that's the Pastel Palettes deck. When I was building this deck, I limited myself to only using Pastel Palettes characters. There are clearly a lot of better options if you want to broaden your horizons to include other characters and other bands. But I told myself, okay, I want to build Pastel Palettes, but I want to build pure Pastel Palettes, so that's what I've done. Now, there's several ways to build Pastel Palettes. The most obvious kind of thing that people will look out for is that they'll want to run the Wind combo, the Bushido combo with the 0-0 Eve, where when you play the climax, if you have the Eve on the field, you can give one of your characters on reverse, top check 4, add a music, discard the rest. And that's a pretty free ability. The problem that I have with that specific combo is that it's yellow. You're playing a yellow climax, and there really are not that many yellow good Pastel Palettes cards. So it just wasn't consistent enough. I would have to go through too many hoops, probably involving like playing an Eve, clocking my second Eve, if I even have a second Eve, or at worst clocking a Wind just to be able to play my second Wind. None of those situations felt really good. So once the Pastel Palettes trial that came out, I immediately took out the Wind and put in just 4 empty gates. So this is 8 gates. The concept of the deck is pretty simple. You want to have 4 colors on your board for the kind of overpowered bonuses that you get from having 4 colors. The biggest of which come from these 2 cards. The Maya is, if you have all 4 colors on the board, she's front 1000. And then at the start of your main phase, you can take the bottom card of your clock and swap it with a Pastel Palettes character, and you're waiting kind of just for a color fix. And this card is, if you have all 4 colors on the board, then she gets plus 15. And then when this card is reversed, if you have 1 or less other characters, then she goes to clock, which is not a demerit. So for the most part, you're going to have something along the lines of this on the board, where you have 2 8Ks and like a 6K hand encore, or probably something like this or this. But as long as you have 4 colors, the Chisatos become just really big and free beaters, which is kind of the whole point of the deck, and you just try to counter the decks that want to on reverse, and just slowly build up stock, try to get compressed, and then when you get to level 3, just kind of blast them with gigantic things. The level 0 game is pretty simple. You run 4 of the Eve Brainstormer, 4 of the Eve that's on play, clock a card from your hand, search your deck for a Pastel Palettes character, 4 Aya runners, and then 3 of the TD HIna Rize effect. Rize effect being on death Rize. On death, I guess it's more like Kirito. Anyways, on death, you can look at up to the top 3 cards of your deck, and then if you look at any, choose up to 1 Pastel Palettes character amongst those cards looked at, add it to your hand, discard a card from your hand, and then discard the rest. And then she also has another effect where on attack you can give any character, including herself, 500 power. And this is here just to be able to mill for free, because in the other build, if you run the Wind, then the Eve combo is what kind of mills through your deck. But with the HIna, you are presented an option of milling through your deck without any climax combo from Eve. Also, you can afford to play this and then play it over it if you really need to mill during your main phase, or just crash into it knowing that you can mill through your deck after you attack if need be. One of the biggest weaknesses of this deck is that there really are not that many great blue cards to be on the field during your opponent's turn. And what I mean by that is you're generally going to have two 1/0 Chisatos backed up by these two specific back rows. But your choice of blue is oftentimes very suspect. Sometimes you have the Eve hand encore, but most of the time you're going to either have the 0/0 Eve or like a 1/0 Chisato. And none of those are particularly great on defense. So you're going to lose that lane 100% of the time, no matter what. But what is really a problem is if, for example, your opponent is able to remove a card on your board during their turn, either through an effect like triggering a wind or being able to bottom deck a reverse character. The Pastel palette setup is very, very reliant on having all four colors, and if any of those go away, then your board is super weak. Let's say, for example, they bottom deck my 0/0 Eve. My 1/0 Chisatos go from being 8,000 power to 5,500. Likewise, if they bounce any of my back row characters to my hand, they become 5,500. So just not a good look there. But if your opponent doesn't get rid of it, then you have a pretty good time, because it's 1/8 case. The rest of the game, the mid to late game, features two of the Eve global level support. Not Eve. Maya level support. Her effect is on play. You can put a Pastel Palace character from your waiting room underneath her as a marker. And if you have all four colors on the board, then she gives global level assist. And she also gains the color of the card that is underneath her as the marker. So generally, you're going to be putting the 0/0 Maya underneath her as a marker, just so you still have the configuration of the Eve Brainstorm Maya, and then you have whatever back row that you need. Except this time, since she's also blue, you're not as restricted on playing low quality blue cards anymore. Where is that card? 2/1 HIna. 2/1 HIna is just a pretty regular card, but it's actually pretty solid as well. Just simple is good. On attack, if the character facing this is level 3 or higher, then she gets 6,000 power, and then she has Pastel Palettes Encore. So if when she's reversed, if you want to Encore her as our Encore step, when she goes to waiting room, you can discard any Pastel Palettes character from your hand, and she goes back to rest, so you can have her next turn. It's kind of just useful because the Pastel Palettes deck doesn't have any early plays. So this is your way of combating level 3s, not only during level 2, but when you get to level 3 as well. She'll be useful because you can just hand encore her and then she can just kill another level 3. Generally going to be somewhere around 14k, either through the 0/0 Maya or the 2/1 Maya, both of which will give her exactly 1,000 power. We run 2 of the Chisato counter and 1 of the vanilla PR Aya counter. Obviously, this can be the Yukina counter if so desired, but in the spirit of keeping this deck model banned, we're running the vanilla 1/5 Aya counter. And then we're running 2 of this Chisato counter, and its effect is when you play this counter, if you have all 4 colors on the board, if you have 4 more colors on the board, then you can pay 1 and refresh. So in a sense, it's kind of like the same thing as the 2/1 Arisa refresh, except in this particular deck, it costs 1 less. Now, for the most part, that's a good thing. But hilariously enough, sometimes you trigger gate on the first attack and you're not able to pay it out because this only pays 2. But still, it's a really, really good card in this deck just because you're kind of just dirtling around for lack of better things at level 2, and one of the biggest things you want to do in this deck is compress and cancel. And so you find yourself in a bad position, just refresh. The level 3 game is 3 of the TD Chisato, on play, not on play. Continuous, if she's in the front row, all of your music characters, including herself, get 1500 power. So at worst, she's always going to be 11-5. And then during either player's turn, when this card reverses a battle opponent, you can pay 1, discard 1, and then burn your opponent for 1. So it's just a really solid card. And then you have 3 of the HIna healer. The HIna healer is, if you have 4 colors on the board, she gets plus 1500 power, on play heal, and then on play, if you have 4 or more colors, then you can take a music character from your waiting room and then put it into stock. Now, she counts herself as blue when you play her. So even if you don't have blue, but if you have the other 3 colors, the moment you play her, she's considered to be on the board, so you are able to get that stock refund. And then we have 2 of the 3/2 Aya, which combos with the original gate from the booster set. Her effect is on play, you can add 3. Look at top 3 of your deck and then add 1. You don't have to show your opponent and you discard the rest. Climax combo, this activates up to once per turn. When this card attacks, if you have the correct gate on the board, if you have a yellow and green character, then you can pay the cost, which is pay 2 and discard 2. And if you do, you can stand a blue character, which in most scenarios will be the 3/2 HIna or the 2/1 HIna. Most likely the 3/2. So the deck's endgame is not too terrible. You have options to deal additional damage if your opponent has things on the board with the 3/2 Chisato, and you have ways to deal damage if you can't reverse anything or if they have an empty board with the Aya Restander, though you are going to be swinging for enormous amounts of soul damage. But the configuration at level 3 with this deck is actually pretty nutty. Because let's say, for example, you have this configuration, which is actually pretty common because you run 8 gates and all you ever do is just hoard resources or hoard things that you want to play at level 3 until you get to level 3. This board is gigantic. We're talking, this card is 14-5, this is also 14-5, and this is like 9, 11, 14, 15-5, right? 9-5, 10-5, 11, 12-5, 14, 15-5. 15-5 and 14-5s. With the effect of anytime they reverse a battling opponent, you can pay 1, discard 1, burn 1. It's pretty obnoxious stuff here. So I think it's a pretty... The base rarity version of this deck is really, really cheap. I don't think a single card as of the time of this video is like over 400 yen. Now obviously English prices will be different, and we're not quite sure if we're going to be getting the additional trial deck pluses that the Japan format has for Afterglow and Pastel pellets and Hello Happy World. But if they do, then we'll get some pretty good cards from the trial deck which we can utilize. If we don't, we're probably just going to run 4 of this and 2 to 3 of this and just kind of fill in the slots. So that's the Pastel pellets deck. That's the last deck out of the 4 that I wanted to kind of share with everyone today. Some of them are designed to be, or were built with a more competitive focus in mind, and others were built kind of with a more experimental or just straight up themed kind. I think to wrap up this video, or I kind of wanted to talk about some of the other things that people have been talking about to me in regards to Bandori. Because since I wrote the video, a lot of people have talked to me about their ideas, and I think a lot of them are very legit, so I want to talk about them some more. But I also want to talk about this in particular, and which one to use. Now, originally, in my article when I first wrote it, I didn't really provide any explanation between choosing one of these 3. I've since updated the article to provide explanations as to why I would or would not want to run any of these cards. But I want to reiterate that idea because I think it's very paramount to understand what kind of decks that you want to face against, as well as understanding what your own deck wants to do. So, for example, actually, this is probably a good idea as well, is just to get the last kind of piece in here. Where is it? All right. So all 4 of these cards kind of essentially serve the same function in that they're early play killers. The 2-1 Himari is a clock bomb. If your opponent is higher level, sends it to clock and then they heal one and you clock them. The Tai and Arisa and Kasumi is a bottom deck bomb. If the character that reversed you is higher level than the current level, so anti-level bottom deck bomb. The Rimi is just a straight up regular reverser for anti-level, which is when this card is reversed, if your opponent's character is higher level than the current level, then you just reverse that character. And then the 2-1 Rinko is on attack. If your opponent is level 3 or higher, then she gets plus 4,000 and 1 soul. Also has resonance with the 3-2 Yukina at the start of your climax phase to get an additional 2,000 power. And out of these 4 options, and they're all fairly good options that you should consider, you want to understand what you want to do with the deck, like I mentioned earlier, and what you expect to face. For example, if you play against a lot of Vivid Strike featuring the 3-2 early play Fuka, backed up by the 0-0 Einhardt, then you want to play one of these, which can remove the early play Fuka from the board permanently, not allowing them to encore and get additional markers. Same idea occurs or applies to the English format, where you expect a lot of Love Live Sunshine featuring Mirai Ticket, Chika, Yo, and Rico, backed up by the 0-0 Kanan. Whereas these 2 cards can reverse the 3-2 Fuka and the 3-2 Chika / Yo. What they are unable to do is remove the characters permanently from the board. So if they have the pseudo encore effects, they can just rest the character and keep attacking, and these really haven't accomplished that much. Whereas these 2 will permanently remove the characters from the board. But when you should use the other ones, the 2-1 Rimi has a really, really powerful second effect of, on attack, you can choose one of your other music characters and give it power plus X, where X equals the number of events in your waiting room. Now that's really powerful because most decks that you're running this card in, you're going to be running either 4 of the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star Operation Tornado event with the 1-0 Christmas Kasumi, or you're going to be running 3 to 4 of the 1-0 Toilet event. If, for example, English doesn't get the 0-0 Kasumi promo. This card is also a lot better in decks that require you to reverse things at level 3. For most importantly, the 3-2 Yukina. You have, for example, 3 of this event in the waiting room. Let's just give a visual representation here. So you have something like this. And this is your board, for example. And let's say that there's a character here that's really big, or for example, like a bodyguard, Naotsugu, for example. I forgot my train of thought. Okay, more specifically, you can get the Yukina to Titanic levels of power, right? So like on the turn, or during your turn, she gets 500 per every other, plus the 500 global from the 1-0 Rimi, plus the 1500 from the Saaya level assist, and you're tapping to deny events and backups from one lane. So like for example, you can just give it on this Yukina, and then she's good to go. Like as long as your opponent is like 14k or under, this card's going to reverse because your opponent can't use backups or events. But on the other lane, if you want to get 2 Yukinas off, if you have events in your waiting room, this card can pump Yukina up to just ridiculous amounts of power. Let's say you have, doesn't matter which event. Let's just say you have 4 Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars, just as a not too far off example, not too far-fetched example. So, Yukina, base 9.5. 500 per every other, that's 11.5. Plus 500 from the Rimi, that's 12k. Plus 1500 from the Saaya, that's 13.5. Plus the Climax, that's 14.5. Plus the Rimi on attack, if you have 4 events, that's plus 6k. So that gets to 20,500 power, which is a comically big, which will guarantee the reverse on most, if not all things. I know there is a concern for, let's say for example, when ReZero comes out in English, 3/3 Reinhardt is going to be a thing that might be on people's minds if that card is something that gets popular within the Western community. So if you want to combat that, you could, for example, on an extreme example, run 2 Rimis, and then Yukina will be over if you don't have the Saaya. Or you can just run 1 Rimi, and then put the anti-event, anti-backup on the Yukina. And so it'll be 20,500 power on attack, which is over Reinhardt, and they would have to run away to another slot, which kind of defeats the purpose of Reinhardt, which is what you want to do. And because you put the anti-event or backup on the Yukina, even though the Reinhardt is hexproof, Saaya targets your own character, so you don't really have to worry about that. And they can't use counters. So for example, they can't use the Reinhardt counter, they can't use any of like the Free Fresh or Priscilla tap counters at all. So that's really good. But in general, on a more broad topic of discussion, if you want to be able to pump your Yukinas to really big amounts of power, then you want to run the 2-1 Rimi. Now the downsides of running the 2-1 Rimi over some of the other options, if you have the specific game plan, is that your front row configuration is not going to be as explosive as, for example, 2 Yukinas and a Kokoro, or 1 Yukina and 2 Kokoros, or something like that, because one of your attackers isn't going to be dealing additional points of damage. The argument against that is, if you don't have the Rimi and you can't get 2 Yukinas anyways, then you probably wouldn't have had a pretty good finishing turn to begin with. So that's really just dependent on what you expect to play against. Like I mentioned, very, very important to plan ahead in deck building to be able to combat the things that you know you're going to face against. Now the fourth option is the 2-1 Wrinkle. And this is specifically for the 3-2 Yukina deck because she has the resonance with 3-2 Yukina to get an additional 2,000 power. Now this is the card that I originally ran in my list and I found to be the most effective because at the time, in my locals, at the same time, there was Sunshine, Love Live Sunshine was not out in English yet for the extra booster. And in Japanese, they were on the list. So no one was playing Sunshine at my locals. And no one was playing Vivid Strike at my locals either. And no one was playing HIna Logic, though I don't even think HIna Logic Volume 2 was even out at the point. But the point is, there were no clear threats in terms of early plays at level 2. And most of the early plays were just kind of early play healers that became like 11k on defense, or stuff like the Morgana healer from Persona. So very generic profiles that really didn't present much of a threat. But you still wanted to kill it just because if you let it alive, they're just going to get a lot more value out of it than they really should. So the original list I ran for the double Yukina build featured the 2-1 Wrinkle because it gets to very, very respectable amounts of power with the resonance. It gets to 13k, and most importantly, 2 soul. Now the soul part is the most attractive part about this card. You're paying 1 stock to get a 2 soul beater that will also kill an opposing early play. If it didn't have the soul, then this card would be really garbage. So 4 options what to choose. Generally, when you're deck building, unless you're really trying to fit in the 2-1 Himari, you're probably not going to play her unless you also run 3-2 Mocha or some semblance of green cards. Just because it might not be worth it just to run a low number of these. Generally, you want to run at least 3, if not just 4 copies of this card. If you're running this, you want to be able to play it as well as having it to clock. So generally, like maybe like 2 copies if you expect you need it for level 2 game. And then if you're not running like a Mocha Finisher, for example, this card is probably not the way to go because just simply put, there's no reason to outside of the stock effect. And it's kind of hard on deck building because generally if you're not running green, you're running red, yellow, blue, generally. So putting your deck at quad color kind of invites some unnecessary deck building and play complications that you can probably avoid. Though, I have been testing out this list with Christmas Kasumi and 3-2 Yukina top end. And because I kind of missed having the 1-0 Arisa toilet event, I managed to fit 3 copies of this Himari. And it's worked out okay so far. Results inconclusive, but I'll have to test more if I get the chance and form some opinions there. So I think that's what I want to talk about in regards to 2-1 early play killers. It's kind of more explanation as to what you should choose depending on your meta. The next thing I want to talk about kind of just to, how long has it been? The next thing I want to talk about is just other cards, other builds. The first thing I want to talk about is the 0-0 HIna, 2-2 Sayo, and then kind of unrelated but also still a bit related, the 1-0 Saaya. Now these 2 cards synergize together. The 0-0 HIna is, she has a continuous, if you are at level 2 or higher, you can put her in the waiting room and then play this from your hand. It's important to note that you don't actually need blue to play her through HIna. So that's something that you want to keep in mind if you want playing this. Her other effect is on play, discard a card, and bond to the 2-2 Sayo. And then the 2-2 Sayo, she gets 1000 per ever the music and has music encore. So it's just a free 2-2 10-5 beater at level 2 that will probably stick around for the rest of the game. Now, I know a lot of lists have featured this card in varying numbers. I know, I think I saw Kit's Bang Dream list feature a number of these. And when I went to Japan, I saw a guide that featured a heavy amount of these with Standby. And the goal of that deck was just to play a bunch of big fatties and just heal all day with the 0-0 Afterglow, what is his name? Tomoe? The drummer. Yeah, the card was it's Global 500 to music and then pay 2 taps heal. I'm not too certain about the contents of that exact deck list, but when I saw it, it seemed like the player knew what he was doing and it was pretty obnoxious. He played stuff like the Lifa counter, the PR from first set. He also played their Free Fresh RSI counter. He also played like a mill counter, all sorts of counters for all sorts of different scenarios. The level 1 game being Christmas Kasumi. So that's an idea. And this idea is something that I've been interested in. I've played not too much with these cards. I've played a little bit, but I also haven't had enough playtesting done to have significant opinions about this combo. Though I think it's probably, you can do without, I think, just because there are other options in terms of early plays, but it kind of depends on what you're looking for, because the most important part about this card is that it doesn't cost any stock and it's a big 2-2 beater with hand encore. So it can avoid things like early play killers, and even if it does get reversed, you can just discard a card that you don't want, a music character you don't want in your hand, and she can attack again. And she doesn't cost stock. So if you're playing a stock intensive level 3 game, such as the 3-2 Yukina, you can still apply pressure at level 2 without expending stock as a resource. And the next card I want to talk about is the 1-0 Saaya. This card is kind of unique in that, like the 1-0 Rimi, they both have climax combos, which you're just not going to use. The 1-0 Saaya on play, you can pay 1, and if you do, grab a cost 0 or lower music character from your waiting room and put it on the stage. And then at the end of the turn, send that character to your memory. That's a pretty cool effect, eh? So there's a lot of synergies that can go on depending on how you want to utilize this type of effect. For example, at level 2, you can pay 1, summon the HIna, and then if you have the 2/2 side, you can just play it. So essentially, it's like you have these 2 cards in hand and this card in the waiting room. You play this, pay 1, and then you play this for free. So that's pretty powerful. Other options are such as, for example, I don't have the card on me right now, but the 0-0 Himari, that kit was also running in his list, where Alarm, if she's on the top of your clock and you have 4 or more other characters, you can salvage 1 music and discard 1. And then Climax, when you play Climax, you can bounce Himari from field back to hand and then give one of your characters 2,000 power. So you can play the Saaya, play the Himari, for example, in the back row, play a Climax and she goes back to hand and you just play 1/1 with the Himari available next turn for you to clock to be able to hand fix. And that's a pretty neat option there as well. Something else that you can do is just grab one of your level 1 game. For example, grab Christmas Kasumi, grab Yukina, grab a bomb. And it's really, really cool, in my opinion, with the Kokoro L1 because, for example, if you play this, pay 1, grab the Kasumi, she's going to be pretty big most of the time if you're playing other characters, assuming that you're going to reverse your opponent's characters, right? Now the thing is, since she's sent to the memory, even if your entire board lives at the end of your battle, you're still going to have an empty slot for your moving around next turn, which is really, really, really cool. Not to mention the fact that the card goes to memory, so in the long run, it's kind of like a sort of minor compression tool. And I'm really interested in the concept of this card. There's a comparable card in first set that I don't think is as looked upon. It's the 1-0 like owner, the old owner from the anime. It's a 1-0 blue, and then on play, choose one of the 2 following effects. Send the top card of your stock in waiting room and play a level 0 or lower character from your waiting room to stage. Or send the top 2 cards of your stock to waiting room and play a level 1 or lower character from your waiting room to the stage. Now that one is like, you have more application there in terms of if you want to just put something on the board that will stick. For example, the most prominent idea is probably, for example, just like a brainstormer. You can play that. Essentially, pay 1. The card is worded in such a way that you don't get to do both, and you don't get to both pay 1 and pay 2, but it gives you the option of paying either 1 or 2 stock. But you can pay 1 and summon the brainstorm if you're like in a bad state, and that can just be like a plus, or you can just pay 1, grab a random level 0, and then attack twice, right? But I think in general, the Saaya has more application just because you can pay 1 and summon a cost 0, which is way better than paying 2 to summon a level 1, because there really aren't really any cost of level 1s that you're looking to summon with that effect. And not to mention the fact that it goes to memory, which is, for the most card, in my opinion, it's beneficial. So I think like a 1 or 2, probably just 1 of, but a 1 of copy in this deck can fit a lot of unique Bang Dream builds in terms of being able to give flexible options. And at worst, it's just a straight +1 in the terms of just on play, pay 1, get a character, get 2 attacks with 1 stock. Now, finally, we get to the Chomama standby pants or any variation of pants 3-2 Arisa build. And the lists I've seen generally include the swimsuit Arisa if they're running the early play Arisa as well, featuring the combination of the early play. Now, at the very beginning, when Bang Dream first came out, I think a lot of people, myself included, were really hyping up this card as just a really powerful level 2 play. Just because of the fact that the way it distributes its negative soul is different from how all the previous minus soul cards have worked so far. It being able to put -1 soul on 2 different characters. So if you have 2 of these, you can split it between like 2-2-0 or like 1-2-1. So if they don't play a climax, they're essentially not going to do any damage that turn. I don't like this card though, and I'm going to explain why. It's a very familiar concept, and at the core of the concept is just that I don't want to be holding a pants when I refresh, and it's kind of hard to get these in your hand through the current list we have. For example, 1-0 Kasumi with this card. How are you going to get 2 of these when you refresh? Because the Kasumi salvages Operation Tornado, and unless you hit like 3 and this card is in a waiting room, you're not going to get her. And most of the time, you're going to be getting her either through just drawing her and holding her, or like triggering a gate and like salvaging him. So to some, like, the first reason of why I don't like her is she's hard to consistently get. She kind of goes against the mind that you want to refresh well, because you're going to be holding on to a pants. Now, admittedly, when she does come onto the board and performs her combo, it's very powerful. But the second point I want to make about this card, about why I don't think it particularly suits my playstyle, the way I want to play Bang Dream, is that you're very reliant on getting the climax every turn. And even if you do get the climax every turn, you're going to be overstewing like mad, right? This card gets to gigantic levels of power for a level 2 character. She has the same effect as the 3-2 Chisato, where if she's in the front row, she gives all music characters, including herself, 1500 power, and she also has an additional 1000 power from her climax combo until the end of your opponent's next turn. So she's basically just going to be gigantic and just there, unless your opponent really wants to specifically deal with it with like one of the with like a bomb, right? But the problem is they're going to start ramming, and they're going to leave their field open, and you're ideally wanting to play the climax again, and you're going to be swinging for 4s and 5s. Of course, like if 1 or 2 of those 5 sticks, you basically just almost win the game, but I just haven't found it as consistent to pull off, 1, getting multiple pans, and 2, being able to close out the game with the 3-2 Arisa. I just haven't done it. I don't think I've come across a list that does it well enough. So if anyone out there has a pretty good performing list featuring the 3-2 Arisa, I would love to see it. Just feel free to message me or drop a link down at the comments below, and I'll take a look at it. Talk to me. Tell me what your experiences are with this card, because so far there are just so many other better options, such as 3-2 Yukina, 3-2 Moca, that Bang Dream has available. So I think that about does it. How long has it been? I think this was a lot longer of a video than I originally planned for. But I do want to hear more thoughts about what everyone thinks about Bang Dream, what everyone thinks about the updated deck lists. I had a lot of fun discussing Bang Dream with the people that messaged me after they saw my deck list, sharing ideas and such, and I hope that there's more conversation that can go on about basically one of my favorite franchises and favorite sets currently in Weiss Schwarz. All right, bye.